Well, shooters and reloaders out there, Fortune Cookie 45 LC coming to you from the Hot Lead Zone. And tonight we're going to talk about the Hornady case comparator, specifically the Anvil. Now a lot of you get the Hornady case comparator for the Headspace gauge and might even have the bullet comparator too, but you don't have the Anvil. Well, the Anvil isn't essential. However, once you get it, it becomes a very nice attachment for the comparator. Now the problem with the Anvil is that it doesn't come with instructions. So you gotta figure out for yourself how this thing goes on, but it's pretty intuitive because you see the attachment onto the calipers, the comparator is a little off center, so you put the Anvil the same off center. In fact, the way you set this thing up is you have it flush. When you put it on this end of the caliper and you tighten it down, you get it so it lines up perfectly with the barrel of the comparator. And that makes sense. Then when you use it, the case goes into the comparator and the head of the case will be flush against the Anvil and give you a very solid point to get the head onto this caliper consistently. Instead of trying to balance the head onto a thin caliper blade, you got a nice anvil. That's why I call it an anvil. So it's really nice. But the problems are if the primer of the case is sticking out at all, even the little firing pin strike, it'll cause this to be a little difficult to get it solid. Well, you can feel that. And if you feel that, you know the primer is a problem. With the RCBS Precision mic, there's a hole there, so it doesn't matter if the primer is sticking out or not. But for the Anvil, it makes a lot of difference. So if you notice the case refuses to solid on the Anvil, then you know what, it's probably a high primer doing that. So let's see this in action. What you do is turn your caliper on if it's a electronic one, and that zeroes it right there. And then you go ahead and take, now this is fired brass out of my Savage 308 11 VT heavy barrel rifle. So you go ahead and measure that. Now it's going to measure to the datum line, but the datum line may not be exactly in the middle of the shoulder, but that's okay. So what happens is you feel the Anvil become square, and when you do, this is a valid measurement. So you get 1.623. Now that is a distance from the head to the datum line, but the datum line of this bushing. But that's the headspace of your rifle is what it is. Okay, so 23.5, that's what it is. So your goal is, suppose you want to hunt, you want that to bump back, you want to bump your head, you want to bump your shoulder back to 1.6205. That's 0.003 less than the headspace of the chamber. So you got a good feeding round in there. It's got just enough slop to go into the chamber easily without hanging up, but not so much headspace that when the round goes off you're going to stretch your brass very much. So this is minimum working of your brass. For that matter, you can bump your shoulder back to 1.6215 and only have 0.002 of excess headspace to minimize the working of your brass. Well, let's go over that again. So when the firing pin hits your cartridge in the chamber, what headspace you have in there will drive the case forward until it hits the datum line on the shoulder in the chamber. That stops the forward movement of the cartridge. Well, then the force of the firing pin will set the firing pin off. Now, if your headspace is so much that it drives forward a whole lot, it'll cushion the firing pin strike and you may not even get ignition. But anyway, this goes forward. Suppose we set that at 2000s. So the firing pin hits this cartridge and drives the cartridge ahead 2000s until it bumps into the front of the chamber, and then the round goes off. Now when the round goes off, something very interesting happens. This becomes highly pressured quick, and the brass is thinner up there in front, so it will expand milliseconds quicker than the rest of the cartridge, so it will grab the front of the chamber right here. Now that means the brass here can't move anymore. Well, we've created 2000s between the head and the breech face, because that's what your headspace was. So now when the rest of the round, when it pressurizes and the rest of the case grabs, that last 2000s is caused by the force of the pressure is going to drive the head back against the breech face, thus lengthening this part of the brass case by 2000s, and that causes thinning of the brass just in front of the web of the case. Now, if your headspace was excessive, say it was 6000s, say it was 8000s, or in the case of some ammo that I recently got, we're looking at 0.014, that's 14 thousandths. If you have that much headspace, then that 14 thousandths is all coming back from this part of the brass, and that's really thinning and stressing the brass in front of the web of the case. That weakening of the brass there is an invite to a head separation. May not happen on this shot, but when you reload this cartridge, you're going to be doing all the bumping back and everything there, but the weakened brass back here is like a time bomb. When you reload that round again and you shoot it again, that extra stretching caused by that round may be enough to cause the head separation down the road. If you load it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, at what point is that brass going to give? So it behooves us not to have headspace that's in that much excess, but you don't know unless you have some kind of gauge that will give you a reading, such as the Hornady Comparator or the RCBS Precision Mic. These will give you the readings. Very essential to know that. And your gauges that are like the little cylinders of steel where you drop the round in, and if it's between the flush and the little line underneath that, that's okay. Well, it may not be okay because you don't know how much headspace is being happening there. For that matter, it's possible to be within SAMI specifications on the top end of the size of the chamber, and then say your ammo is set at SAMI minimum. Well, that happens to be 10 thousandths. 10 thousandths is a lot of excess headspace. You don't want a chamber that is at SAMI maximum, because you're looking at stretching of the brass anywhere around 10 thousandths. That is bad. That can cause head separations. Okay, so we know that our chamber is, get that square, 1.6235. So it's always essential to have fired brass from the rifle that you are going to be loading for to determine the chamber reading. So now if you take, say, new brass and you put that in, so suppose you're going to load some new brass. This is Lapua brass. And you see that this Lapua brass is 1.619. Well, that means that if you load this ammo, put a primer and powder charge and a bullet in there, and then you fire that, this brass will stretch by 0.004, and all that stretching is going to happen right here at the case head. Well, 0.004 is not bad. It's okay. We want less than that, like say 0.002, but 0.004 will be okay, and then after we fire this brass, we can go ahead then and size it the way we want. So that gives us a safe situation with this brass, this Lapua brass. So did you notice how the anvil helps us to get consistent readings with the comparator? So I would recommend that this anvil be acquired by the users of the Hornady Comparator, because it really makes the comparator work about 5 or 6 times better. More consistent no matter what kind of operator you are. So take care, we'll see you next time. Good reloading to you.